being a woman in comics is challenging. Being a woman in comics in a position of power is even more challenging. I would say that how I speak has to be very specific, and I have to watch the way I speak and what I say far more than if there was a man saying the same thing. And a whole bunch of people out there listening to this are gonna like, yes, that's absolutely true. And then the people who are the ones who take issue with how I speak are the ones who are saying that's nonsense. Just so you know. So you're saying that's nonsense right now. You're the problem.
Hello and welcome to Comic Industry Insiders, the weekly podcast where we get to know the operators of the comics industry and tease out the tips and techniques to help grow your career or business in comics. Our guest this week is Jennifer Haines. Jenn is a force of nature. There's nothing that will make you feel like you've wasted your life more than spending an evening with Jenn and hearing the story about how she built her chain of comic shops while simultaneously getting her master's degree in literature, raising two amazing kids, and singing competitively. And that was before her tenure as president of ComicsPRO, the trade organization for comics retailers, during one of its most chaotic times. We caught up with Jenn just after she stepped down as president. What we got was a wonderful exit interview with one of that organization's most effective leaders. She talked about mitigating risk when starting new ventures, the simplicity and effectiveness of building a retail environment for everyone, and had some very blunt words for those that treat women in power differently than they do men. So please, enjoy this career-spanning conversation with the force of nature that is Jenn Haines.
I feel like you need an applause track. I don't know.
I really do. I really do. I think, or a live audience. I think that is my next step, is a live audience.
All right.
I don't know how many people I can get into my bedroom.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, I'm all for that. You know, we've all done enough panels at conventions to know that you know, you can just all you do is say the line exactly the right way, and they think it's a joke, and they answer it with with a laugh. It's great.
There you go. Yep.
How you doing? How are things?
Things are good. Things are hectic as always.
So we're talking right after you legitimately, you just stepped down as the president of ComicsPRO. This was I did 2 weekends ago, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, I did a whole conference since then, so I don't know. I've kind of lost track of time, but in third week of February. So 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? What was the? I mean, we're going to dig deeper into your experience as the president, and even you've been on the board for longer than that, and are still, part of that organization. But what was the experience of legitimately, intentionally stepping away from that? You weren't thrown kicking and screaming out the door, right?
No, I wasn't. It was definitely my choice, and it took a lot to get to that decision. It's a job I legitimately love, and I think that I'm really uniquely positioned to do that job. I've built up a lot of really strong relationships throughout the industry. I have a really strong sense of how the parts of the industry work together. I've always kind of seen big picture very clearly, and I think that has given me the ability to sort of understand things at every strata of the industry. But I started to realize that I was president for 3 years. I started to realize in the summer that something was really kind of going a little off the rails for me in terms of my ability to manage my time, my ability to manage what was going on at home. My kids were getting more complicated. When I took the job, my kids were 6 and 9, and now they're 9 and 12. This is a really different world. So I have a kid in middle school, I guess grade 7 now. So that's a whole different world, and there's so much more support that they need. And so I started to realize that was becoming more difficult to manage, but also that I was spending so much time working on other people's businesses and trying to improve other people's businesses that I was kind of neglecting my own. And it wasn't It was not something I could sustain. That was an unsustainable. Marco, our executive director, knew back in I think September that I was going to be stepping down, and he immediately was like, "Well, can you just do less? Still be the president, but just do less." And I was like, I can't. Like, if I'm going to wear the title, I have to be doing I have to be doing it to its fullest. I can't just do less of a job on something. There's no option there for me. So it was to step down and like give the reins over to somebody who I knew would do an amazing job, which is Joe Murray, and he's going to be fantastic. And he and I have been working really closely together already, and so we're on the same wavelength about everything. And yeah, he's going to be great. I have absolute confidence, and that's another reason why I'm able to step away, is that I could see clearly a path that the organization could continue what we had been building and move forward with that. So, but it was definitely, like, I would say it's like definitely one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Like, it felt, I was so worried about letting people down. I was worried too about a little bit about my identity in the industry, because it has been like an identity for a while, and I can, say this is who I am. And so then now it's like, well, what's my identity post presidency? So there's a little ego involved too. And we don't, as humans, I don't think we ever make a decision that doesn't have ego involved. So I'm fine to talk about the fact that my ego is involved in it. I like being president. It's cool.
Yeah.
But a lot of work. My goodness.
I can only imagine. We were, you and I were talking the other night. We talked about came very close to being on the board, and when I found out that I unintentionally said no, like I thought, somebody came to me and said, "Oh, what do you think?" And then when I found out later that even though I was up, being on a ballot with people who obviously were going to win, when I found out that I'd lost, it was a sense of relief, and then him seeing that sense of relief in me, and he was like, "Okay, never mind." Because, and then realizing later, oh, I talked myself out of the job. Oh, thank God again. That's crazy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. Yeah. I mean, I have the same problem too, and it's in that it's really difficult to do something poorly, right? It's difficult to do less.
It's just
so
not
much harder.
at all in my bones. When I was raised by a father who really works very hard and does. Yeah, I mean, he really has built an incredible career for himself and through very, very hard work. Like, he just retired 2 years ago at the age of 80. So, he worked 6 days a week. He was gone before we woke up, came home for dinner at 8:00 kind of thing. And while that was on the one hand something I don't want to emulate, is that much time spent away from my family, that much time working, that much focus on work. I was raised with an ethos that work is what you do. You do everything to its fullest, and doing it not to its fullest is just... My family has a deep history of theater as well. So whenever we go to an event, whether it's a dinner party or a wedding or a funeral, we will talk about whether or not it's a Stewart production. So Stewart is my maiden name. So whether it was done successfully from a production standpoint or not, did all the pieces come together properly? Was it run on time? Was everything done the way it should be? Was everything spelled correctly? Was it this is how we look at other events, and how we look at other people's interactions with the world is through how well they achieved perfection. So, I mean, that maybe is not the greatest headspace, and I certainly have, been working on trying to let perfection go a little bit. But that's kind of how I was...
That sort of post roundup, right? That let's review everything we just saw. I think that's I don't know. I would say that's probably a really important skill. I mean, I know this in my own life. Excuse me. I know this from my own life, in that my dad ran restaurants, and so he would take me to those restaurants, and then afterwards, on our way out, we would do a little stop off, and he would say, "Okay, what did you see?" Right? And I was. I was 9, 10, 11, in the same age as our kids, right? And that was super influential for me, was how do we, if we're talking about this with the most critical eye, what did we see? I think it's important. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think
was your dad, what did your dad do? What did that?
So my dad was a patent agent.
Okay.
So inventions need patents to like declare them to be like held by the patent holder, who will then hold that patent for a certain amount of time, will make money off that patent. It's, basically how inventions get protected by the person who made the invention. And so no one can just like steal it and just make their own copy. So he would go through the paperwork of figuring out whether it was in fact a unique item, and then filing with the patent courts or whatever that. Wish I could explain it better. I feel like I'm failing on this explanation. But anyways,
all right.
Patented things.
He patented things, yeah.
Yes.
And so the other night we were talking, and you said that there was he had a hobby that was very influential for your understanding of collectors and that mentality. Can we talk about stamp hinging? This is a word I had no idea.
So my dad is a lifelong stamp collector. I don't know why stamps. I don't know why that's his thing. I think, part of it is the hunting down of things, and the fact that every country has stamps, and there's history in stamps. You can watch a country's history unfold through their stamps, right? You can see where freedom is gained and lost, and you can see where political struggle happened, and where the currency changed, and all of that stuff you can see in stamps, which is amazing. When the names of the countries change. And there's a lot to the stamp collecting thing. You can find raw stamps which have never been attached to anything, or you can find stamps that have been attached and try to detach them. But eventually you're going to be assembling them in a book in a way to preserve them. And so to do that, you hinge them. So you have this sticky on, well, it's not sticky on one side. It's like, it can be adhesive on one side. You just get it a little bit damp, and you stick one side to the stamp, and you stick the other side to the book, and it forms this like little tent, so that you could easily detach the stamp. But they are the most fiddly things in the world. They're tiny. I mean, stamps are tiny. The hinge is tinier, and it has two sides. Right. And so when I was a kid, I kind of like saw him doing this hobby, and I got fascinated with it, and I got into it for a little while. And so he taught me, as soon as I got stamps, I had to hinge them. I had to put them in the book. I had to preserve them correctly. And I really do believe that this led directly to my comic collecting, because I was raised with a collector mentality. I was raised with the idea of you preserve. So I bagged and boarded my first comics. I did not mess around. I was bagging and boarding right away. I was cataloging. I was doing all that stuff because I was raised with this collecting spirit around me. And my dad still collects stamps all the time. He goes through stamp catalogs and looks for things that he wants to fill the holes in his collection. And he has like a pretty amazing collection.
What an interesting market. Is it still vibrant? I mean, is that like a market that is still going? And
I guess
it's can't imagine. I mean, it's funny. I the number of times you talk to people and you say, I work in comics, and they go,
like,
they still make those? Yeah. And here I am talking about stamps. But I think if I had to put out a letter, I think I could find a stamp. Yep. Somewhere. Yeah,
it's still a thing for sure. I mean, I know that the Canadian government still creates like various like special stamps every year for things like Lunar New Year and centennials of things, and celebrating certain celebrities or certain important political figures, and so they're constantly issuing stamps for those. I imagine the U.S. government does too, but I have no idea. But and I think it's just like with any niche hobby. And so we can talk about barbershop as well. There's a community that like speaks the language and knows what it's about and super passionate about it, and they come together. And outside of those times that they come together, you would not necessarily know that person was into that thing at all, because it's like that niche thing that they share with this niche group of people. Sure. And then so.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, okay, so you're growing up, spending a lot of time with your mother, and all the time with your father you're spending with the stamps.
Yep.
At some point in your life, you discover comics. I have to tell you, we are really enjoying the kind of the research that we do in getting to know the people we're going to interview. And I have definitely enjoyed this, in that there will be people that I've known, like yourself, that I've known for decades, that we get into this, and it's like just finding out all this, I don't know, new shit about someone. It's great. It's like I don't know. It's like a really great date, where you're like, oh, I'll tell you all my stories, and there you go. So in that research, we talk a lot about comics, right? We're, that's what we do, and we all kind of have our origin story. And yours involves a book that I think that we both share in common. In that, I remember the first time I read *Strangers in Paradise*, and just literally falling in love, thoroughly, irreplaceably in love. And went back and forth between Kachu and Francine, and I still to this day I don't know that I can choose. But yeah, you had similar experience.
Yeah, so I've often said, and I've even told Terry more directly, that the dragon wouldn't exist without Strangers in Paradise. The Strangers in Paradise is the origin of the dragon. There's a through line, but from Strangers in Paradise to me starting my own store. There's no question for me. Like I started reading comics when I was a kid, going to visit my family in England, and they always had like European comics around and things like the Beano and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I got my comic start. And then reading like comic strips as well. And then I didn't really start reading like proper North American comics till I was in high school. And it kind of came out of a love of Batman animated series, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It's a gateway for a lot of people. And so I checked out, Batman Adventures, and then I started reading Batman proper, and then I started hanging out at the comic store a lot, and then I think I might have even started working in the comic store. And then it was while I was working there that I was just like, picking up stuff off the shelf to read, and I picked up this issue of Strangers in Paradise. And I just had no idea. I had no idea that something else existed beyond superhero comics, basically. Even though I had read Euro comics when I was younger. Like, in my head, I hadn't connected those two things. Yeah. And so here I am reading Strangers, and I'm like, this is like, this dialogue I think I've said. Like, these are people who, like, live in my soul. This is, like, actual real life. This is a thing that I can see myself in it, and I can feel the catharsis from it. And, Aristotle always said the most important thing to get from art is catharsis. That's the point of art. The point of art is catharsis. So if you have comics as an art form, should give you some form of catharsis, hopefully. And whether it's like cheering for the good guy over the bad guy, that's one form of catharsis. But this was like a personal, visceral, deep in your gut, I know this life kind of catharsis. And that's when I realized, like, comics really could be for everyone. And there really were comics for everyone. And I just had to broaden my scope. And so that's sort of where, when I say it's like the root of the dragon, it's like my belief that a comic shop could be for everyone. A comic shop could provide for everyone who walks through the door. And it doesn't have to be just this one note niche thing that is perceived to be the comics industry, especially by outsiders. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's lovely. I mean, there's so much to dig into what you just said, and so much of it is stuff we are here. So I do want to talk, though, because it's obvious, you're showing off that classics education of yours there in that answer.
I love Aristotle's Ars Poetica so much. I talk about it all the time. I'm not gonna lie, it's weird. It's super weird.
Yeah. I cannot tell you, as someone who values this because of how difficult it is to do. If you ever are in publishing and you want a proofreader, my God, this woman, she will just find oh my, incredible. I will tell you, to this day, there was a note in Exo Man of War. There was a word that we chose the wrong spelling on. I still don't entirely understand what we got wrong, but I went,
it was team.
Let's look it up.
Team. It was you had teaming with something, but it was like teaming, like fish teaming in a stream, and you had done the TEAM instead of TEAM.
That makes more sense. I see. Oh well, there you go. Yeah. Anyway, all of this to say, so you spent some time as a teacher, right?
Yes.
And this was somehow at the same time. I think you were you running the comic shop when you went back for your master's?
Yes.
And then began teaching.
Yeah. So so listen. All right, here we go.
Okay.
I'll give you the whole story. I got an undergrad in classics, classical studies with classical languages is my minor, which is how you do it. Obviously, you double up.
Of course.
Of course.
Because, you're going to pay for the school anyway. You might as well get 3 degrees out of it.
Yeah. So I planned to go on to do my master's and my PhD eventually. And the problem was that I ended up doing 9 straight semesters, which is insane. Because there were too many courses I wanted to take. I ended up picking up a secondary drama minor at one point that I also got rid of because it was insane. I also had started with a history major and switched into classics. So I had I did 5 years for my undergrad. I could have done it in 4, but I took 5 years and still managed to do.
You could have done it in 2. I can tell right now.
9 straight semesters. I even had one semester where I was taking. There's like a five course load per semester as your max. I had 6 courses because I needed to fulfill the requirements to graduate. Otherwise, I would have had to stay another year. And the way the classics department works, certain courses were only offered every other year, and some of those were mandatory. And so I had to. So I was taking 2 mandatory classes in the same time slot. So I went to one and recorded the other, and then I showed up for tests for the one. And thankfully, the classics department was so small, everyone knew each other. My teachers loved me, and so they were happy to accommodate this. They knew that the situation I was in. So, but it was wild. I'm like, yes, I'm taking 6 courses, and 2 of them are at the same time. It's fine.
So I guess my real question is, when Harry and Ron, when you guys started running around together, that was a Harry Potter joke.
I know. Basically, what happened at the end of my 9 straight semesters is I was super burnt out of school. And I was not ready to go back to school. So instead, I submitted a business plan to the bank, and I got a line of credit and opened a comic shop 4 months later. Because that's how you take a break, right? So yes.
Okay,
So I graduated in end of April '98, and I opened in September '98, and then I still.
I just want to put a point. So you're 23 at this point, yes?
Yeah.
1998, not exactly the healthiest time in the comics industry.
No.
No. It was rough.
No, the dollar was bad. The dollar was bad too. The book dollar was really bad.
Oh, yeah.
The next couple of years after that got so bad. At one point. Right now, the exchange rate's it was like a 1.65 at one point.
Oh.
And it was awful. Oh my God.
You're 23.
Yep.
You somehow, just because you need to relax, decide to build a business plan that gets you a loan at 23 in 1998 for a comic book shop. And I guess really what my question is, what the fuck were you thinking? Did your dad step in? Does your mom
Well, no, my dad
what are you doing?
My dad was a big believer in letting me make mistakes, and so I think my sense going into it was I knew the town, I opened where I went to school, so I knew that it was a university town. It would always have turnover of customers. There was a comic shop already, and I kind of underestimated how that would impact things. It's kind of to my luck that they went out of business a couple of years later on their own merit, not anything I did, because it's very hard to wrest comic customers away from their store they're used to.
That is very true.
It was not going to happen. So I recognized that the town could support a shop, and I wanted it to give it the shop that I felt it deserved, which was one that was more welcoming of families and people who don't look like the traditional comic shop or like myself. And I also knew that I was young enough that if it failed, I could restart something else. So I was like, I'm going to give this 5 years, and if in 5 years I haven't done, if in 5 years not working, then I'm out, and I'll do something else. And I'm young enough that it's not going to matter. So that was kind of the headspace I went into it with.
Oh, I love that. I really do. In fact, this is not the first time even this week I've heard that story of somebody saying, I think I'm going to try this. I've got plenty of time to if this doesn't work, I've got plenty of time to start over somewhere else. I think it's very smart. I mean, working without a net is glamorous, but knowing that, if you land hard, you're still going to have time to get back up. I mean, that's very, very smart.
Yeah. So then my competition went under. Business boomed, more than doubled overnight, basically. Literally, they put up a sign on Wednesday morning saying they were closed permanently, and so then we went and put another sign over that said, "Please come to the Dragon for your comics." That's how that worked. So, and I even had Diamond on the phone with me being like, hey, we have a palette of comics that we can't deliver and we can't tell you the details, but if you'd like to buy them for this incredibly cheap price, I was like, oh my God. Were they maybe destined for the same city as I am in? Because yes, I will. So I like even got like my subscribers' books essentially from Diamond that had been, you know, like obviously like abandoned by this other store. So yeah, so things turned around pretty rapidly for me, and then I just got the itch to go back to school. Like I couldn't ignore it, right. And so
because once it was succeeding, that's boring. So we got to go back to school.
So I applied to the master's program at University of Toronto, which is about an hour away. It's like was a closer hour away in back then than it is now. Now there's a lot of traffic between here and there.
Sure.
And with the intention to continue on into the PhD program. So 2-year master's, where the second year of the master's is also the first year of the PhD program, and then there's like 5+ years of a PhD. You know, it's however long you take to do the thing. I loved it. I mean, I love classics. It's totally in my soul, and I it's amazing. I moved to Toronto partway through the second year of my master's, so I was still commuting for the first year. Moved to Toronto because my intention was to pursue my PhD, and like literally that month they told me they were rejecting my PhD application. I'm like, guys, you couldn't have told me that a month before I moved? Like, come on.
Oh my God.
So now I'm in Toronto. They believe that the major reason why they rejected my application is that my attention was split, that I had the store, and that I was doing something else on the side, and I wasn't devoted like heart and soul to classics, even though I was, and even though I was doing the coursework and I was completing the exams, and I believe out of my group that completed those exams, and I was writing at the master's level, so there was 2 different levels you had to write at. There was certain marks you had to get to consider a pass. I passed all my exams on the first round, and no one else did. And yet still, I was not the candidate they wanted for the PhD program. And, you know, I think part of it too is like
they didn't know who you were. Like
maybe
don't you realize?
I don't know how like tenacious I am and how like relentless I am. Like part of the thing that I was really good at classics too was drawing together a whole bunch of threads into one cohesive thought, and like looking at bigger picture things. And a lot of the times they really tended to reward people who were very microscopic in their focus, like whose interest was like, say, just this one section of the Peloponnesian War. Whereas I was like, I want to look at mythology. And like, I'm going to do a paper on love and how love appears across the entire classical corpus. Like, how does love appear and change across the classical corpus? Those are the papers I liked to write. Yeah. And even like my chosen fields of study were just like on the outskirts. And one of the excuses that was given to me was that for what I wanted to study, there wouldn't be anybody who could test me on it. And I was like, but isn't the point of a PhD to break new ground? I thought that was the point.
Right.
And so I want to break new ground, and you want to...
This feels like you're failing, not mine.
Yeah, so I started to see a little bit of like there's a little like sort of old-fashioned like dragging of feet, a little bit of an old boys club mentality in classics. And
shocking.
It's just
this
like that's what I'm drawn to I guess. I don't know.
Are you saying that there's a bit of stodginess in the studying of the classics?
Yes, of the ancient world, yes. And I think if I had gone to a different university, I might have had a different experience. But U of T is an exceptional university, and I really, I did enjoy my time there with certain teachers, not with all of them. And I made a few really good friends out of that experience. But while I was doing that, while I was wrapping up my second year of my master's, there was a job posting for a Latin teacher at a feminist private school in downtown Toronto. And I was like, well, I could do that. I had like TA'd on a semester of Latin when I was working on my undergrad. I had taught some classes here and there for my profs, so I'd been a teaching assistant. I'd been teaching assistant a few times. And I was like, and Latin is like, I love it. I love it so much. I've tattooed it on my body. Like I adore it. I've been doing it since I was in high school. So since grade 10, I've been doing Latin. So I did Latin in high school as well. So I was like, I can do it. It's the same course, it's the same textbooks that I learned from in high school, so it made it even more fun. Or I was like, I totally know this material. I can do this in my sleep. And so I applied for the job.
There were no more modern textbooks on Latin? That's
the
crazy.
The Cambridge Latin course is pretty solid. They are doing a massive revamp right now that is, I think, due to come out any day, or if it hasn't already come out. But it's a big overhaul of the coursework to bring it a little bit more into this time period. But yeah, the Cambridge Latin course has been used for a really long time.
It occurs to me, you own a comic book shop, you are in a barbershop quartet. Mm-hmm. If you do any sort of YouTube deep dive, you can see you talking passionately about Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
This Latin thing might be the geekiest thing about you, and that is saying a lot. That is saying so much.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Why the dragon? Where did that name come from?
So I wanted a name that was easy for people to communicate verbally. And that was associated with the products that I sold. So that idea of the fantasy world. Most marketing is word of mouth. Most successful marketing is word of mouth. So the fact that you could tell somebody, I went to the dragon, right? That's an easier sell than most other forms of marketing. I wanted a name that was would stick out at least a little bit. I didn't want it to be generic. And I wanted it to be easily memorable. As it turns out, Dragon is a little generic, as it turns out, and ties in, there's a lot of stores that are called Dragon in their title. And I do get asked a lot by people who haven't heard of my business if I'm a Chinese restaurant. Which is I even have a review. I even have a 5-star review about my fantastic chicken on Google. It's great.
No, really?
Yes. I even asked for it to be taken down because I was like, it's really not for me. It's still there. My chicken is fantastic. I don't know. It's 5 stars. So weird.
As long as it's 5 stars.
My chicken is fantastic. 5 stars. So weird.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
And I did reply to it as well, just to be clear, to say, I think you might have the wrong business, but thank you very much for your support. Yeah. So that was kind of the thought behind it. Also, if you want to talk about dragons are mythical creatures that evoke really visceral, deep, personal feelings. They, we've been dealing with fighting against dragons or a worm-like, snake-like structure since the dawn of time, and it's something that's woven into our cultural consciousness as a primordial power. So. Right. Yeah, it's just that people have a connection to dragons. They just feel connected. It's funny though, we in the store of the dragon, we just got so many people who were like, "Where are your dragons? How many? Where are your comics about dragons?" I was like, I have these 2. I mean, I don't control who makes comics about dragons. There's 3 or 4 comics about dragons ever.
Oh my goodness!
So I started.
What a failure!
I started carrying plushies for the store because of this, because people were constantly asking me for dragons. So I was like, all right, I need every plushie distributor that carries dragons. Let's go. So then I had tons of dragons in plush format. So, and I think that's kind of that was one of the ways in which my store became fully family focused, is this need to have broader product lines and really tap into the younger readers, younger buyers, younger market.
It's so that actually dovetails nicely into one of the things I wanted to talk about. Actually, a couple of them. The first is in, I think, another interview, you said something about 25% of your customers are families, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Talk about how you track that. That's a solid number. And how do you continue to attract that? How is that? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and you're trying to build the kind of shop that you wanted to shop in, and I think we all kind of come to retail with that in mind. What are you doing on a continuing basis to continue to create that atmosphere?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that we call the store family focused. So not family friendly. Family friendly is not the same thing. Family focused is totally different. Family focused means we are consciously thinking about families in everything that we do, in our layout, in our advertising, in our product mix. We are thinking about what happens when a family comes into the store together and what do they get out of that experience. So we always make sure that our aisles are wide enough for strollers. The lines of sight are great for parents to be able to keep an eye on their kids. We have a coloring table in our kids section where there's books and there's stuff they can color, so the kids can sit there and be occupied where their parents go and shop, because as a parent with younger children, you don't always want to, you maybe want to break off and do your own thing for a second in a store.
Yeah.
We have
and
product
it's
lines.
much easier to like say, hey, let's go to the comic shop if you know they know there's something for them to do there, right?
Yeah, we also give out free comics to every kid who comes into the store. So we use leftover free comic day books and Halloween Comic Fest books and give those out to everyone, every kid who comes in. And it's great. Like they get a free comic, and they also get something free, which takes a load off their parents as well, having to like necessarily spend. So they have a desire to come back with their kids, knowing that there's not going to be as much pressure on them for the kid to say, I want this, I want that.
Right.
And
although part of you kind of wants that pressure a little. You want some of that.
I know. Well, I want them to keep coming back.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, you know.
And we also, we reward report cards. In Ontario, we have learning skills on report cards, which reward things like working in groups, working independently, risk-taking, attendance, things like that. And so you get a letter rating on that, and an E is considered excellent, and that's your top mark. So for every E on your report card, you get a free comic at the end of the year. And so that's another thing that we do. We are also out doing like book fairs and like getting into schools all the time, and just looking at like where can we advertise that's the most powerful for parents. So things like radio ads during pickup and drop-off times. And the Guelph Storm is our local hockey team that's in the same mall as where my Guelph store is. And so advertising at the games. Advertising in those spaces that are specifically maybe going to have eyes on it by kids and by their parents. So, yeah, so that's a really big part of it. In terms of how we track it, it's literally eyeballs. So you literally sit there and you watch your customers come through the door, and you analyze it over a period of time. Gotcha. And I also look at my subscriber mix, and that usually has a pretty good, usually a fairly solid like 25 to 30% women in my subscribers. And then also our attendance at gaming events, which again is usually around 30%, women, children, and members of the trans community. And nice. So that is that's a big thing for us. Big enough that it got Wizards of the Coast's attention, and I did a whole bunch of articles for them, and talked about that quite a bit, about how you make that happen. And again, it's being welcoming and accepting. It's also making rules around language. Like we'll call customers out on swearing in the store. Like it's just not okay, because there's kids around. Like we want everyone to feel comfortable coming in. We also, like, our kids section is separated entirely from the rest of our store. So I've seen a lot of videos of stores over the years, like a ton, where they show their graphic novel wall, they end at Walking Dead, and then they start their kids section. I'm like, can't put those side by side. That doesn't work. So when I first started a kids section, I was really adamant that I had to make it an island, so that a parent knew when they took their kid to that section that they weren't going to accidentally like end up looking at something else. They weren't accidentally going to flip open a book and see something that they weren't meant to see. So it's those like really conscious decisions. Yeah.
All right. That's a great answer.
It's everything. It's like, so the music is specific. It's meant to be like a little indie and offbeat, but also can have no profanity. The walls are blue because blue makes people feel calm and comforted, and therefore wanting to shop more. Like things like that. The scent, we make sure the store smells nice all the time. We make sure it's well lit. Like these are not impossible things for anyone to do.
They're not huge. They're not huge changes to be made. No, that's
true. We also
true.
really like hardwood floor, because if kids spill drinks on it, it's not a big deal. You just clean it up really easily. So
you inside of there though, you mentioned a lot of advertising. It's funny, when you talk to I did a panel once on metrics, managing your metrics for stores, and I talked to a whole bunch of chain owners and other big shops, and I said, what are the metrics you follow? And I want to say it was Phil Boyle who said that, like, when it depends on, because he's got so many stores, that if he's paying extra in rent, the rent is the and advertising are basically the same line, right? On the budget. So if he's paying extra in rent, that means more foot traffic, which means he spends less in advertising. Yeah. I think it's a thoroughly logical thing.
I agree. And when I opened, I was really specific that I had to go where I was visible and not where people would find me, which is often the thing that a lot of stores open with this idea that, well, because I'm a collector community, people will find me. But I don't want just collectors. I want everyone. I want everyone to feel like that's their place. I want anyone to walk in and not worry about being judged, not worry about whether they're going to be quizzed on their knowledge of some superhero in order to prove their worth. I don't want that because I've been through that, and I don't want it for my customers. So I want them to feel like it's a totally normalized shopping experience. I want them to walk in and not know they're walking into a comic shop. I want them to walk into this great-looking store that looks like it's got cool stuff in it, and then realize, oh, this is a comic shop? This is not at all what I thought comic shops looked like. So that was my goal in everything.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, so talk about then, because it sounds like you have a lot of product that's not necessarily comics.
Yes,
so
I do.
Talk about categories, and I'd love to think, talk about what is it, like how do they rank, both in gross dollars and in profit. What are the big keys for you? Like, if you want to talk about how do they start, like what is your biggest category and move down?
So if you count comics and graphic novels together as a category, then that would be my biggest category. And it's so basically, if we do, new comics. No, I don't do back issues at all. If we take very broad strokes and we are going to do comics, games, merch. Comics and games are about equal at 40%, and then merch takes the other 10%. But if I segment that out, comics and graphic novels are about equal at about 20%. But like my collectible card games, so like Magic, Pokemon, Lorcana, is 23% of my gross sales. Just CCGs.
The CCGs actually outperform comics and graphic novels as individuals.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's
which is wild. I have actually been doing a lot of work on this over the last few days, which is why I have these numbers like right at my fingertips. So looking like exactly at really, really deeply analyzing my sales last year compared to the year before, and where the top SKUs are and the top categories, and what's gaining and what's losing steam, and how can I make that better. This is what you do when you step down as president of ComicsPRO. Now I have all this time on my hands to analyze the numbers. See, this is great.
And this, you have to do this for a little while, because at some point you're going to go apply for that PhD program again, and then...
I don't know if I am. My skills are so rusty now, I can't even imagine what would happen. Like, Latin would probably be okay, but doing ancient Greek again, I might, I don't even know if that's a possibility. Like, I can read Greek characters, and I was doing some modern Greek in Duolingo for a while, which was fun. And every so often I'd be like, oh, this is totally the same as the ancient Greek word. That's wild. But no.
Girlfriend, hard same. I don't know what my Greek skills have just been so diminished.
It's all Greek to me. I don't know how many times my dad cracked that joke to me over the years.
I'm sure. Listen,
so many times.
I'm a dad. I get to make the dad jokes. That's one of the few perks of the job.
Yep.
All right, I want to talk to you for a minute about someone who's been very important in your life. Your life partner, Amy Chop.
Yep. She is
my life partner. Tell me a bit about how you two met. And how you became so entangled, because I don't know where one ends and the other begins. She likes more color in her hair. I think that's the difference between you two. I'm not sure.
If you go back in time and look at pictures of me, I've had a whole bunch of different colors in my hair. If you recall the blonde phase, that was not a good choice. But
yeah. The bright red was interesting. It was a good face. Yeah. It was a good face.
So Amy and I met on the set of The Who's Tommy. We were doing a university production of Tommy. Because I'm a musical theater kid as well. I've been doing musical theater since I was 7 years old, and hence the barbershop. It doesn't come out of thin air. It came out of somewhere.
Yeah, I got it. Suddenly everything makes more sense. Yes,
it does,
go ahead.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it really, really does.
So
once you're a musical nerd, like a musical nerd, at 7, all of nerddom is laid out in front of you now.
I think that's pretty much it. So Amy was on my stage crew. So I was stage managing Tommy, and she was on my stage crew. And in the course of that production, I got bronchitis. It was bad, and I was like running a fever, and I could not function. And so I would show up to rehearsal, and I would just relay a whole bunch of instructions about what was like in my head that I knew had to happen. Like I knew what the props were supposed to look like. I knew what the props were supposed, like what my vision was. And I was the only person who had that information. So I was stage managing, but I was also like doing like prop managing. It was a small production, so I did also costume design and like a whole bunch of stuff. But anyways, I did all that like production stuff is what I did. So I would show up to rehearsal, and I'd just be like, I need you to make the guns for the beginning, and I need them to be like just like these colors, these materials, like just make it work, look up some reference. And I'd spew some instructions out, and then I'd go home and crash. And Amy did everything exactly the way it was in my brain. And it was like the weirdest thing ever. And it was shocking. And so I was hiring someone to run my Pokemon League, because Pokemon's had multiple lives, and back then in 99, 2000, Pokemon was big. And so I was hiring somebody to run my Pokemon League, and when she showed up, I was like, oh, I know that you can do this job because you know what's going on in my brain already, and so therefore, like, this would be great. So I hired Amy to run Pokemon, and for the first, I want to say 3 months, she ran Pokemon only. And then I went away on a trip. It was my cousin's wedding. I went to England for 2 weeks. Very big leap of faith. Not many people leave their business 2 years in and travel abroad. To let everyone really feel what year it was. My staff sent me faxes of the diamond order for me to review pricing, and then I would fax back an answer. It was a faxes. Yep.
Oh yeah. I remember.
So that was weird.
I bought my shop in 2000. I remember this period very, very well. Yeah. Yes.
So while I was away, the majority of my staff, so I think I had 3 staff at the time, so the 2 other people on my staff who were not Amy just managed to completely screw up everything they possibly could. They just, the store was not on fire, but it felt like the store was on fire,
Right.
And so when I got back, I fired them, and I promoted Amy, and then I hired some other people, and then that was kind of it. And then Amy's been my manager ever since. And I mean, I left and moved to Toronto for 10 years. She managed the store, basically the day-to-day operations and working with customers and, placing orders and things like that. I do the majority of the ordering, but she would, let me know when things needed to be ordered and keep me basically on top of what was happening at the store. Manage the other staff, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, she's she knows she will do things the exact way I would do things. And that's what makes her the perfect manager. And so we also we're friends, and we did musical theater together. And, after I had my first kid, I was like, I really miss that. I really miss performing. I really miss doing theater. I miss, I just miss that. And I was a drama teacher as well, so I taught Latin, and I also taught drama. So always had this drama career. I'm a 3rd generation theater person in my family. As far as I know, there's maybe more, I don't know, but I definitely am 3rd generation. And so it's it's just in my blood. And I looked into musical theater in town, and I'm like, the rehearsal commitment is insane. It's 2 nights and an entire Sunday every week. And I'm like, I can't do that. That's nuts. So then I just cast the net a little wider, and I found this barbershop chorus, and they rehearse once a week. And I was like, barbershop, that sounds like a cool, fresh new challenge and a different headspace than anything else I'm doing. And so I was like, hey, Amy, you want to go check out this thing with me? And so we did. And then then we joined. And that was 10 years ago or more, I guess, a little bit more, 11 years ago. And then, I was the first to go into a quartet, and when our lead stepped out, I was like, well, I actually know the perfect lead, and her name is Amy Chop, because she has a actual classical musical background, and she should come and sing as lead for us. And then that's we've been singing a lead bass duo since then. So
that's
as well as running
beautiful.
The store. So yeah.
So which of you is Kachu, and which of you is Francine? Have you you dialed that in?
I probably catch you when she's Francine. Yeah, I would say that. I think she would agree on that. Yeah.
All right, well, talk about staff since then, because it sounds like you got really lucky early, right?
Yes.
I've
been unlucky.
Huh?
I've been unlucky with staff. I've had some not great staff. Yeah.
How do you find good people? How do you keep good people? I mean, that is the real limiter for growth, isn't it? Right? Who is representing you when you're not there. Right?
Yeah, for sure. So much of it is a huge leap of faith. And I think a lot of stores get caught up being really worried about what happens when I'm not there. And you just have to let go of that to a certain extent. You just have to. You have to decide to take a chance on someone. And what is the worst that's going to happen? You come back after 2 weeks abroad and you fire them. That's it. That's what's the worst that's going to happen. Or they steal from you, which has totally happened to me as well.
Oh, yeah.
But you're going to have customers steal from you too. So,
sure.
And this is just... You need people. You also need alternate voices in your store. You need people to keep you accountable and to keep you looking at things through fresh eyes. And you need customers to come in and see different people behind the counter. Because what if your customers don't like you? I'm sure I rub some people the wrong way. I mean, I know I rub some people the wrong way. There's definitely some people who don't like dealing with me.
I find that impossible, typically.
But, I don't want to limit my customers' experience in the store. And different staff will have different skill sets, different product knowledge, different things that I can use to make the store a better place. So staff are just super valuable to me. Now, how I find them, I really have no challenge with the number of people who want to work at the store, which is great.
Sure.
So when I put out a call for resumes or applications, I usually get if I do a 1 week call, I'm usually looking at about 80 to 100 applications. And it's people wait for me to open the window so that they can apply.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, people do believe it's just fun to work in a comic shop, and they don't realize that it's actually a lot of work, and I have very high expectations.
Yeah.
So I make sure we talk about that in the interview process. I want to make it really clear that my expectation is that you are constantly learning and you're constantly improving. I don't expect you to know everything off the bat, but I expect you to work to know it. I expect you to come to the store ready to improve and to grow every day. That is key. And then I interview as many people as catch my attention. I have a 2-part application process. They have to submit their resume, but they also have to fill out an online survey, which is just a Google form. And in that Google form, it asks things like, why do you want to work at the store? I talk about inclusivity, and I ask what that means to them. I ask for their knowledge in different product levels, or not knowledge level of different product lines. What was their favorite game or book? Themselves in 3 words, which is always very funny and weird. And then their availability. So there's some practical things in there, but then there's some really key things. I could just read the why do you want to work here and what does inclusivity mean to you, and I could stop and not read the rest of it. I usually, by the end of those 2 questions, I know whether I'm going to interview someone or not. That coupled with the resume. And I have to get both. If I don't get both, then they haven't actually followed the instructions, and I don't want anyone who can't follow instructions. The resume's got to be properly proofread and not have errors in it. I'm okay with the Google form having errors, but not the resume. There's no excuse for that. If you can't have an attention to detail, then you cannot work for me. And so if I have those 2 parts completed the way I want them to, and I see something I like in the answers specifically, the resume is not as important to me. Retail experience is great. And it ranks higher for me than product knowledge, honestly. But there's so much more I need to know from sitting down and talking to the person face to face. And so I usually will interview about 20 to 25 people, which is exhausting.
No kidding.
But I need to find the right person or people. And usually what ends up happening is I end up with too many people I want to hire, and so then I keep a short list of if someone steps away from a job, then maybe I just contact this person and pull them in. And so I've done that a few times where I've just gone down my list and called someone in to replace a staff who happens to leave right after I hire, and I'm like, come on.
Well then, that's a lot. I will say I've reviewed this question with a number of different retailers, and including my own experience, that is a lot, what you just said.
Yep.
How is the retention after that? How long do people stay with you?
So they usually stay with me, at least a year. if not longer. So I had a staff member. Last year was really hard. I had a lot of turnover in 2023, like a lot. And I believe it had a lot to do with the fact that it was far enough away from the pandemic that all of the like thoughts during the pandemic of, if I wasn't in lockdown right now, this is what I would do with my life, right? And those were all kind of came to fruition. It was far enough from that to say like, okay, I'm ready to go and make that choice. I'm ready to take that leap into something else. And then for some people too, it was like, retail is a lot harder now than it was before, and I need to like step away. So I had somebody who'd worked for me for 3 years leave in 2023, and one who'd worked for me for 7 years left in 2023.
Oh,
that was
wow.
devastating.
No kidding.
And then I had a couple other people who'd been with me for over a year. And then I had some people who didn't make it through the year, which was really unusual, but also not necessarily, it was like their choice. They decided like it wasn't the right fit for them, and that, you know, I was working with them as best I could, understanding there were certain limitations, but then we kind of got to a point where we were like, does this really work for you and for me, and we need to maybe really consider this. And so it was like them coming to that decision because they didn't love the job, and not because they didn't want to stay, but just more stuff going on in their personal lives that was insurmountable. So retention is good. I think it's approaching it in that sense of like really understanding how valuable each of my staff are and how much they bring to the team. They all bring unique perspectives. They all bring a sense of their own style to our social media. They all, you know, have their things that they sell to my customers that are going to be different. So they're bringing this huge breadth of product knowledge and love in front of my customers. And they can do some social media things that maybe I didn't know. And they maybe know some social media things that I'm not in touch with anymore because I'm getting older every day. And the social media gets weirder every day. So, and that's fine. I accept it. It's fine.
That's true.
And then telling them, making it really clear to them and meaning it that, first of all, I want to hear from them. I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to conversation. I want to know what we can do better. I want to know their suggestions. I want to know, you know, what they think we should bring into the store, what they think we should change, how they want to like switch up how we display stuff. I want to know all that, and I mean it. Like when they come to me with those suggestions, unless it's like super crazy and I've already dismissed it because I know I've thought it all through already. I very much want to have those open conversations, and then also saying it and meaning it that the thing I want most from them is for them to grow and to work at growth, and they don't have to know everything off the bat, and they don't have to be perfect. And then we also have a really robust user's manual for the store. There's actually 4 manuals. There's a policies manual, procedures, there's an events manual, and then the managers have their own manual. So there's multiple manuals, and so there is a codified set of standards to be followed. And I think that is like really key, especially when you have multiple stores. You want there to be a consistency from store to store so that a customer who walks into one of your stores has the same experience when they go to the other store, and that gives them a sense of trust that makes them want to return. Even coming into the same store over and over, if you get a different or like wildly different experience, you're not as likely to trust that experience. When you come in and you get a similar experience, you get a similar vibe, the same flavor of retail shopping experience, you're more likely to come back because you trust it, you know it, you're comfortable, you get more and more comfortable every time. So that consistency is just really key. And I look for people who are really personable, who I want to talk to. If I start zoning out in the interview process, I'm like, nope, not this person. I don't, like, you need to hold my attention for the whole interview. And if you do, then that's something worth pursuing. And because if you can talk to someone, that's what customers want. That's why they're coming to your store. Otherwise, they could just shop online. But they're coming into the store. They want to talk to another human, and so they want that to be an enjoyable experience. So, yeah.
Amen. All right, I just want to skip up. I'm gonna not skip over. I want to talk just like in a brief. We're talking about somebody. You now have 2 stores. At one point, it was 3, right?
Yes, it was.
You won the Eisner Spirit of Retail Award in 2012.
Yep.
Right? That's right.
Yes.
Which apparently you, at the same time that you were having a kid, because you do nothing in alone. You group.
Yep.
You are constantly doing multiple things.
Yep.
You won the Harry Kramer Award, right? For your contributions to the Canadian comic retail landscape.
Yes.
By the way, that's an incredible award
it's
title.
It's basically the Eisner for Canada. It's
I get
the
it.
store,
Right. So
store
there,
award for Canada. Yes.
You're Eisner Award winner, multiple continents.
Yes.
You've just those accomplishments alone, right? So you've been at this now for what? We're talking about opening your store
years.
in,
Yeah.
huh?
25 years.
25 years. That's right. The big 25-year thing.
Yeah.
So you have, and you've talked to, obviously, we're going to talk about ComicsPRO here in a minute, but you've had a pretty broad experience of other stores. What are the 3 things that you could say nearly every store could do? I've actually asked this now a couple times, so I'm always getting great answers, right? What are the 3 things that you think could elevate any store? They put their attention on this, you're going to level up.
Yeah. I mean, I do think like that basic housekeeping piece so easily achievable at this point that we should not still be talking about it, and yet I can still talk about it. Lighting, scent, sound, sight lines, aisles, organization, signage, all those things. Just make it like walk into another retail store. Walk into another retail store and experience it. You better believe that every time I walk into a retail store, I'm analyzing it for stuff that I can steal. And use in my own business, because they all have like massive market researchers. They spend tons of money figuring out exactly how to lay out a store and exactly what to do. So why wouldn't I steal all that information for myself? I mean, every retailer should just read Paco Underhill's book, because it is really like Why We Buy is it's the Bible of retail. It's was written a long time ago now, but it still holds up absolutely, and everyone should read it and pay attention. So that is super key. I think that prioritizing customers, far too often stores do hire people who are more into the product than into the job, if that makes sense. So they tend to be maybe a little bit shyer about approaching customers. They kind of just want to stick to their own thing. They're used to sticking to their own thing. They're maybe used to not having the thing they love be respected or accepted by people, and they're maybe shy or timid about speaking about what they love to customers. So I think like as much as it does mean like hours and hours and hours of interviews and deep processes to get the right staff, finding staff who are going to prioritize your customers. And if they're not those staff right off the bat, find a way to make them that. They should be, getting out from behind the counter, approaching customers, talking to customers, helping them out immediately. I cannot tell you the number of times I walk into a store and no one pays any attention to me at all. And that's not just comic shops, that's any store. You know how annoyed it makes me to be not even acknowledged that I've walked into that store? Like literally, again, I took time to leave my house to come here. I could have bought this online and I walked into this store, and so you better pay attention to the fact that I'm here. I went to this clothing store recently and I wrote a whole thing about it to my staff because I was like, this is exactly how not to do business. And I first of all was not acknowledged. I ended up with like an armload of clothes I wanted to try on, and still no one was approaching me to help me out. And eventually, at the end of my transaction, I went to talk to them and I was like, look, this is not how you do things. Like, this is not how you do retail. Like, I was mad enough that I was like, we need to talk. We need to have a conversation about what just happened here. I was like, no one in the store is being serviced. No one is being talked to. You're not treating the people here the way they want to be treated. They came here for a reason. They want you to be there at their side, telling them the deals, telling them, helping them find sizes, helping them to the change rooms, all that stuff, checking in on them. But yet, I have been barely spoken to the whole time I've been in here. And the response I got was, corporate has decided that it's more important for us to service our web customers than the customers in the store. So we have to prioritize filling web orders over customers in the store.
Wow.
And I was like, but customers in the store in front of you, they are the priority. And that's the thing. The customer in your store is the priority over anything else. So when that person walks in, make them feel welcome, make them feel seen, make them feel like you're there for them and you're ready to help them, and that they don't have to interrupt you or put you out of your way to do something. Like you are there because they came to talk to you. So be there for your customers. So that's a big one that I think like any retail establishment could benefit from, including big corporations. And a third thing, let me think. I mean, I'm always going to talk about kids' books I think like the kids market is so easy. It's such an easy market. Kids books are driving the book market entirely, and kids graphic novels are pretty easy to sell. I mean, you don't have to carry a ton of SKUs, but there's certain SKUs that will sell guaranteed. You just look at bestseller charts and figure out what those are. Dave Pilkey, Raina Telgemeier, like those are home runs. And I have a lot of retailers who say, well, the Barnes & Noble carries them, or I can't compete with the big box store. But you can, because you already have people coming into your store, and your customers have children, and they already came to support you. So why do you think they don't want to support you more by buying that book from you instead of going down the street to the Barnes & Noble? Like,
also, in this day and age, I don't think that the Barnes & Noble is necessarily something that people are automatically going into anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I imagine their walk-in traffic has probably just dropped precipitously in the last few years, and they're here in front of you. Yeah. Wow.
Well, the Indigo here, which is like the Barnes & Noble of Canada, they regularly, the one in town regularly sends people to the Dragon for like manga and graphic novels, because they're like, we actually have no idea what we're talking about, so go down to the Dragon. Because that's the other thing. Those big box stores cannot keep on top of all their product. They have so much product, it's absurd. And unless you have someone in there who's a specialist, who is also working every single shift, then that whole section of the store goes unserviced. So your job as comic shops, this is our specialty. So why are we cutting off a section of like high profit, great turn items? It can be scary to bring in stuff we don't know. Like if you don't have kids and you don't know the kids market, it can be harder. But there are really great sales charts and great data out there about book sales that are really easy to apply to your store.
Do you think you could you measure? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure. I don't know if you have I doubt you would have this metric in front of you. But for let's say just the kids section alone. I mean, of that, what did you say? Like 20% in the graphic novels. Do you know what percentage of that you think was kids books?
Sorry, for my graphic novel sales, how much the percentage is for kids books? Hang on 1 second.
Oh. Well, excuse me.
But I can tell you that our top sales, our top graphic novels, I think 1, 2, and 3, I think were all kids books last year. Kids graphic novels accounts for 16% of my graphic novel sales.
Well, all right then. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like my second highest category after manga. So.
Incredible.
Yep.
All right. Well, there you go.
It beats out my Marvel sales, beats out my DC sales. It's kids books. Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. The kids book market it's great. And also like all the talk about Scholastic lately, especially. I don't know how it works necessarily in the States. I know there's some restrictions sometimes on getting into the school boards, and I have applied to be like a registered vendor with my local boards so that I can kind of more freely be able to set up a book fairs without them asking questions. And that might be something worth looking into, whether you can become an authorized vendor for your region and then be able to suggest like a book kind of like did something not so great last year, and a lot of schools are like, I don't want to run Scholastic book fairs. I want to do something different. I want to change it up. And I've had so many schools come to me this year saying like they would like to do non-Scholastic book fairs, and they were looking for alternatives.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's definitely something worth pursuing.
So, coming back around to your time at ComicsPRO as the president. So you came into that role in 2000, I think, right around a year or so after the pandemic distribution shut down and all of that disruption that brought, right?
Yes.
So we were all in a year into this mess of relearning every system, remaking every system, building new systems.
Yeah.
And you come into that role, and so you've had that now for 3 years, around. Yeah. How many years did you age in those 3 years while we were going through it in real time? Yeah.
I mean, the pandemic was really hard too. Like I think we're still underestimating how it's affecting people, how it's affecting retailers. We got the ground absolutely pulled out from under us. You know, we learned instability on a massive level overnight, basically. And it's hard to imagine stability again. So we're all kind of like in this sense of, oh, what's going to happen next? What's the next thing that's going to come along? And there has been a lot of change since then as well, which has not made it any easier. But I never would have imagined that the government could close my store. Like, that was never on my radar, ever. And now it's on my radar. And that's a weird way to live. And like, I've still been saying, like, we've still been working for the last 3 years to recover processes that we lost during the pandemic, because it broke everything that we did at the store as well, because we were shut so much. It was just really disruptive in every way, and it was the great disruptor of our lives. Like, it's of this generation. Like, it's truly the disruptor. Absolutely. So I've forgotten what the question now was.
No, I think you got the
I came in a year into the pandemic, or a year after the pandemic, almost a year into the pandemic, almost a year after the shutdown of distribution. I had been working as vice president up until that point for about the 3 years before that, and I had already truthfully been doing the work of the president behind the scenes. Right. So I was already, although I didn't have to like take any of the heat for it. I didn't have to be responsible for it. I didn't have to be the person who, said the important things and communicated. But I was doing work behind the scenes. I was working with companies to figure out what was going on. I was trying to communicate with Diamond. I was communicating with, Lunar and with DC, and I was getting all the information I could and relaying it to the rest of the board and trying to just figure out what was happening. And then we were also working on, presenting members with ways to, leverage online sales. How do you do live shows? How do you do it? So we were creating webinars to help retailers like operate through the pandemic. And then I was also I helped run a Facebook. We didn't have any access to any of the money that was going to American stores. And so we ran it was called Be Our Heroes Canada. You can still find it on Facebook. It's really great. We did two 12-hour days of content that was all like interviews and live drawing, and we did an auction, and it was a lot of fun. Also exhausting, but was a good focal point, because sometimes there was a lot of times during that year especially where it was hard to like remember how to move forward. And so, I think at the end of that year, I know like Peter Dolan, my predecessor, he was really done with the role at that point. He had gone through the hardest year of it for sure. Like, I'm glad I wasn't in the hot seat for the distribution shutdown. I would not enjoyed that. No. I did get to be in the hot seat for when Marvel distributed with PRH, though, so that was a very hot seat to be in at that moment in time. But again, it was moving towards that position for a while, and intending to be in that role for a while. So I was happy to take it on.
So during those years that you were, what would you look back on that? What do you think are what are the biggest achievements of the organization during that period? I mean, we know that it was full of challenges, but what are the things, when you look back, like the legacy that you left, what are the things you remember?
So I would say, I've been on the board for 8 years, and this board is the most active, the most proactive, the most vocal, like night and day from the other boards that I've been on. Traditionally, the ComicsPRO board has been a lot more of an advisory group that kind of waits for things to happen, and then we talk about should we do something, and then we have a vote as to whether or not we do something, and then we do something or not. That's kind of how the board worked in the past. Like, should we write a letter to so-and-so about this new publishing strategy, or should we, get involved in some way? When I took it on, and I think we'd been working up to it for a while, sort of more of an idea of how does ComicsPRO fit into retailers' lives? How do we give people the tools to succeed and grow and move forward? So things like doing more webinars and more educational support. But then also, like, how do we get the information we need? How do we communicate more effectively with our partners in publishing and distribution? How do we get across to them like what is what it is that we need and figure out how they can do what they need to do while also still meeting our needs. So I just worked really hard all the time to do that, and was constantly like, something would come up, some issue would surface on a Facebook group, and I would be already on email talking to whoever I needed to talk to find out the actual truth behind it and what was going on and how we could fix it and what we're going to do. And I think that level of activity being observed by the other board members generated more activity. So it became the thing that caused people to say, okay, well, I'm going to be active too. Like, it kind of like emboldened board members to act. It created a culture of action, which didn't exist before. So I think like that is my true legacy as the president, is creating that culture of action, where every board member has projects that they're working on right now. Everyone has specific things that they're working on that are like pretty big. A new mentorship program, the metadata project, working on getting us more present on social media, working on creating internally like some documents that we need to make sure that if something happens to, say, Marco, God forbid, we have some sense of what to do without him. Because, Marco holds a lot of information in his brain that we don't all have. So,
he's been at this for a minute.
Yeah, so these are the things that we are taking care of. We also have the new advisory council of publishing and distribution partners. That is going to be a chance to open up the conversation, where it in the past was me individually going one by one to different people. And like when the paper crisis happened, that was a lot of phone calls and emails to go to everyone and be like, what's your situation? How do you feel about paper? Where are we? What are you seeing? What should I be worried about? Just trying to like get the information for everyone. Where with an advisory board like this, not only do I get to talk to everyone at once and be like, hey, what's going on with paper? But they're talking to each other, which is also something that didn't exist before the annual meeting in 2022, or 2023 rather, where we had a sit-down meeting with like the biggest players in the industry. It was a very, very secretive sit-down meeting with the biggest players in the industry about what we needed to do in the industry to move things forward and to kind of bring it back together, to sew back up all of the things that had split apart during the pandemic and afterwards. And that, that idea that these companies who everyone thought would never speak to each other are now speaking to each other, that is something that ComicsPRO made happen as well. So that's also another huge legacy that came out of my time. I think I influenced it. I don't like to
that's why
really ascribe stuff to me. Like, I will tell you that for years, every conversation I had with DC involved Wednesday on sale, every single one. And so, but I'm not going to take credit for them saying they're going to Wednesday on sale, because there are other people who had those conversations too. And it's really hard to take credit for things that can have come out of so many other parts. Like, it could have come out of other decisions or other conversations. It could have come out of personnel changes allowing for that to happen. And it could come out of, suddenly the stars just align and they just make it the time for that thing to happen. So I know that I definitely influenced a lot of stuff happening over the last few years, and will continue to do so without just not in the forefront. But yeah, it's hard for me to say like the legacy. I think those two things, though, the much more active board, I'm gonna take a little credit for that one, and that under my direction, we got companies to talk to each other in a real way, in a real productive way.
I did try to word that as the achievements of the organization during your time.
I just made it about me, I guess.
Not everything's about Jenn. I mean, we've only been talking about Jenn for an hour and a half now, so I don't know why you think everything's about Jenn.
So then I can talk about the metadata project, though, because that definitely, that has the potential to do a ton of stuff, and that has very little to do with me. That is Katie Pride. And Jessica Wells at PRH is, the two of them have really, and Brian Garside and Django Boren, those are the spearheads of that project, and they have been just incredible working on this all year to try to get together some sort of standards that we can use for data so that we can do a whole bunch of other things with that data, and also just have clean data that we can all synthesize into our various point of sale systems. So
I can say that
nice.
I was, I tried to remain active in that conversation, and I don't know, critic is the right word, but I kept trying to point out where the stumbling blocks could be, right?
Yeah.
In my interview time, I actually interviewed Brian Garside yesterday.
Yeah.
And we talked almost exclusively about the metadata project. And so I can say that having come out of that, like where we were a year ago at the annual meeting versus what came out of it, like it's an impressive amount of work. It is. I have much more faith that it is going to become the standard. I still see, because the metadata has been so important to my career, like it's been something I think a lot about. Like I still, there are a few places there that I'm concerned, that they make sure to not lose, like this is where this could go wrong,
Right.
So, but it is an impressive achievement. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where they go with that. But
yeah. It's going to be good.
But rather than retread that again for anyone who,
yes.
If at some point the Brian Garside episode will be up, you should go watch that, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be much more thorough.
That's exactly. I want to talk about something right now, that a couple of little, I don't know, maybe controversial things. I think of them as things that have two sides that we don't often talk about, right? The first one is returnability.
Yeah.
Right? And when you took office as president, one of the things you were pushing hard on was returnability. I had a video where that was a big chunk of it, where you were talking about that. I know from having a lot of experience in setting up programs that both with and without returnability and other incentives, and I can tell you that from the publishing side, generally speaking, the goal of returnability is to make sure that you're going to increase the sales of the rest of the series, right? It's not just to get one book on the shelves and choke up shelf space.
Yes.
I feel like I've spoken to enough publishers at this point, and I've seen enough data that I can categorically say that returnability doesn't do that, right? It just does not. It does not increase the sales of a book.
Yes.
It allows some books to get big headlines, and sometimes the big headline is what you want, either for investors or for just increasing your cachet. This is speaking as a publisher, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel about that? Like that push for that at this point now, these years later, and why do you think it doesn't work? If you agree with me that it doesn't work, many retailers will tell me I'm absolutely wrong. So
I know, and I have had these conversations as well. That there, I've had conversations with both sides, publishers and retailers. Retailers often will say, "Well, I don't understand how you can say it doesn't work if this is a number one of a series that has no proving ground. Basically, how can you say it hasn't increased the numbers?" And I think the fact is that publishers generally know what a book is going to do and have a good sense of what it's going to do. And then when they provide it with returnability and it doesn't actually significantly increase that, then it's kind of clear that returnability is not the thing moving the needle. If they drop in a blank cover and all of a sudden they have a big bump in sales, that's a measurable increase. It's from my conversations with publishers over the years, it's pretty clear that variant covers sell more comics than returnability does. And the question is, why is that? I think it has a lot to do with cash flow more than anything. I think a lot of retailers just know, this is how much I'm going to sell, and I'm not going to go over that. The idea of returnability is to provide that, the opportunity to find a ceiling, to know, how many customers we really have who want that book. But the thing that it really does is provides retailers with a sense of comfort that the publisher is sharing the risk. And that sense of comfort it's just psychologically makes such a difference in ordering habits. And not just ordering that title, but ordering that publisher's titles. So when there's a publisher who provides that care to say, we're going to share this risk with you, there is more thought that goes into that publisher's titles than might ordinarily go into it. Now, obviously, Marvel does not do returnability. DC rarely does returnability. So you're like, well, they don't have to, they're not sharing the risk, and why are people still ordering their books? Because it's Marvel and DC. I'm talking about everyone else. Okay, so everyone else is not Marvel and DC, and
I've never worked at Marvel or DC, so all of my experience has been outside that. Yeah,
they have to find a way to stand out. And how do the smaller publishers stand out? How do they get retailers to buy into their brand, their ethos, their product line, to pay attention, to just even pay attention? And returnability makes retailers pay attention. Like, I really believe strongly that returnability is beneficial to publishers, even though it may not seem like it moves the needle in a significant way. It creates better feelings throughout the industry. And right now, in the post-pandemic time of very negative feelings, I think that is invaluable.
Okay. Let me, I mean, I don't know. I hate playing devil's advocate, right? I do. I don't think the devil needs an advocate. But having spent so many years on both sides now of this, I can, like, there are certain things that you just said that I bump on a little, right? Okay. This idea that the retailers need to see the publisher sharing the risk. Well, the retailer gets far and away the largest chunk of the revenue generated by this book. True. Right? The cover price, the retailer gets 50%. Everybody else gets to, scrabble for what's left, right? Yes. So, and that includes the publisher the publisher or the creators who did it on their own or whatever, who spent all of that money on the creators who made the book, right? They spent the money to take it to the press. They spent a lot of money taking it to the press. Like all of those things, the publisher has done all the risk, right? For the retailer, we're talking about some risk, absolutely. But as from that publisher side, this idea that we're going to share in this risk, well, it'd be real nice if that was actually shared, right? But the retailer can decide. But I think that the issue that I have with that is that there are publishers who have gone out of their way to provide returnability, and they've provided other things, and they've either failed or they've come close to failure. Right. I mean, I would argue someone that I did a lot of work with, Aftershock, right? They've been struggling with bankruptcy these last few years. Yeah. If there was another publisher who was more intently listening to what was being said, would make retailers feel more comfortable on the market, I don't know who they are. Yeah. Right? And there was not that response in sales that would increase. Yeah. I think, to my mind, it seems to me like there is the subtle thing in marketing that has to happen, but you really just have to focus on what the quality of the book is, and then present how quality that book is, right? That's everything. It's about
no matter what, there does need to be quality. No amount of sales tactics will move the needle if the quality is not there, for sure. I'm fully speaking just from what I observe from retailers and how they think about their purchasing and how they feel about their purchasing. And this industry has a lot of feelings. There's a lot of feelings in this industry.
That's true.
This is not, no one is in comics because they're just like wishy-washy about comics, all right? Every single person working in comics loves comics. They're passionate about it, like to a fault at times. And so it's about feelings. Yeah. It's not necessarily about business, it's about feelings, which is like a benefit and a curse of the comics industry. We have these passionate, tenacious retailers who are never going to give up their stores. Like, they'll never go away. The comics industry will never die because we're too damn stubborn. Like, there's no chance. But at the same time...
absolutely right.
At the same time, sometimes just, step back and take a look at how you fit into the bigger picture and see where... what's the fight you want to have, and is this the thing to feel the passion about? Because you can't fight about everything; it's too much. You get where does your passion need to go? So, but anyways, that's an aside. I do feel like that feeling of a safety net is the thing that does drive sales for some retailers, for sure.
I get that.
Yeah.
Would you say you talked a little bit about that passion and them sharing that passion and? I've often wondered, looking back on my time as a retailer, because during that period we had the CBIA come up, and then the Facebook groups, and And I spent so much time and energy kind of like really investing in that conversation. And I look back on that and I wonder how much stronger would my business have been if I had not, right? And I'm not saying that that's what's happening to these stores now. They're all making the decision, I think, that that is probably best for their shops. But would you say that sort of online community, let's leave out the conversation for ComicsPRO for a minute, right? Let's just leaving that aside. Would you say it is a net positive or negative on our industry? I feel like you just answered that.
I mean, I already publicly said that I feel like the industry is too negative right now, and I got criticized over it online. So it's, you can't.
That's ironic.
Right? People, I think that communities form. Community is multiple people working together towards the same goal, right? That is the definition of community. And so internet communities form when you have a bunch of people who share the same opinion. I mean, yes, they're working to, like, it could be a community of comic retailers, but generally the ones who speak share the same opinion. And you end up with just a repetition of the same ideas until you start to wonder, well, am I the one who's wrong? Like, is this everyone's experience and it's just me that's different? But the fact is that the people who talk online the most, that's such a small number of people. It is not a reflection of the industry. The people who are not talking online, frankly, don't have time and are staying out of it because we also don't want to get cut down by, like, the people who are just behind their keyboard and think that there's no repercussions to being really rude to someone else because they don't have to look them in the eye. And there's no point in wasting energy just to be attacked. And so, as a result, all the positive people back off, and it just leaves the negative people, and just this vacuum of conversation. And I know this is exactly the point of the video that people are going to start criticizing me for. So there you go. It's going to be great.
There are many who agree with you, and there have been times I absolutely agree with you. I will say that I'm still obviously conflicted on this, but I think it is an important conversation to have.
It's for sure conflicting because it is a source of information for what needs to be done, because the people who are loud about, hey, this thing needs to be fixed, often that thing needs to be fixed. And so when somebody brings it up and somebody gets passionate about it and yells about it online, then you're like, okay, well, let me go look into that and see what we can do about it. And so that's great. It flags things that need to be fixed. And I think it can be a good communication tool. It can be if we all agree that we're a community pulling together towards the same goal, not necessarily just having the same conversation. Right. I think that it can be a good communication tool. But it requires just respect. It just requires respect and understanding that not everyone's experience is everyone's experience. Like, what happens in my store is not what happens in everyone else's store. So I would never assume that mine is the only store that matters. Mine is the only store, like, the experiences of my store are the only experiences that exist.
Right.
But it does feel like some of the people online do have that feeling, like their store is the only experience, that what they need for their customers is the only thing anyone needs for their customers.
It is an industry of feelings.
It is an industry of feelings. It's the title now for this podcast. That's Industry of Feelings.
Industry of Feelings. In a CPLD interview about ethics, you said we need policy in place before you need it. And you were talking, I think, at the time about ComicsPRO and the policies that were. Can you talk about what some of those policies that you hopefully got done in that are in place now? Anything that obviously I don't want you share anything that's inappropriate for you to share outside the group, but what were those that weren't defined before you went in?
We have an anti-harassment policy specifically to do with, there would be times when people would end up in really uncomfortable situations, whether they were of, after hours drinking, something happened with someone of the opposite sex. That's one option. But also other times where somebody was just being, like, even attacked online or in person and just being, like, just really made to feel incredibly uncomfortable. And, it was definitely troublesome to me to discover that we did not have an anti-harassment policy, and has since been put into place, and has, I think since we put it into place, We have not actually had to use it, which is really great.
That's wonderful.
I know, it's amazing. But we make sure that before the meeting happens, we make sure we remind everyone that this is the expectation. This is the expectation. Like, if you are going to go against this expectation, then here's what's going to happen, so that you know the rules. And this is like, I mean, it's parenting 101. You don't just like hand out punishment without giving the kids any expectation that this is what, if you do this, then this is going to happen, right? So it's a little bit ComicsPRO, a little bit like parenting. But that's it. Like, you need to be clear, and same with my staff and my staff manuals. Like, here's the expectations. Here's what's going to happen if you don't meet them. Like, this is what I expect. That's it. You need to tell people what you expect. So now that we have the expectations in place, I think we feel a lot. It feels better, because we also can say, like, you knew the expectation, so now this is the consequence. So, yeah.
Well, having had some experiences in that area, I'm so relieved to hear that, and I look forward to the streak of post policy in place, not needing it to continue. Yeah. I think that would be wonderful.
Yes.
It's funny that you said what you just did, because my next section legitimately is, how has retailing changed you as a parent, and maybe how has parenting changed you as a retailer? Those are two great, side by sides.
I don't know that I can separate them, because they just feel so like ingrained with one another. Like, I can say like how retailing has changed my children as they're children of me. That's, they have a very different perspective on how things work. And during the pandemic, they just like, all their friends just had like time off school. They went to work every day. They had to like come to the store every day. They made forts. They like packed shipments. Then they got inside the boxes and made forts in the boxes. I don't know, like, it was wild. It's a wild time. I made them make video content, like whatever I could do to keep them doing something and not going crazy. But they had a totally different experience. They watched me struggle every day. They watched me fight for every single dollar, to fight to keep the business going. And they, afterwards, my younger was talking about this cat plushie factory that she was going to make. And she talked about all the experiences that people would have coming to her cat plushie factory, and about how there would be a really great cafeteria that was also be for the workers, so the workers could have really good food, but then the people visiting the factory could go to the cafeteria, and then they would go to the gift shop where they could buy their own cat plushie. And then she told me about the COVID protocols that would be in place for the gift shop. It's like, oh my God.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing.
Super weird.
Oh no, that's incredible.
Like, the entrepreneurial spirit is strong, like especially with the younger. Like, she's just always like trying to figure out a business plan, and what she's gonna do, and what she's gonna market, and what she's gonna put in her Etsy store, and how she's gonna like monetize her YouTube channel. And it's like, it's on. She's going. She's entrepreneurial brain for sure.
I love that. Well, having been raised by an entrepreneur and being an entrepreneur, I get it. Like that, it just gets ingrained.
I think being an entrepreneur is a lot about being super flexible. Like, you really need to be able to balance a lot at any given moment. You have to be able to shift with the winds, honestly, and adjust all the time. And I think that is a benefit as a parent. It allows me to be able to be flexible as well with my kids, and not expect a sort of a consistency or a predictability to any given day. Like, every day is going to be some collection of activities that happen in some order. Like, there's so many productivity books. So I've been trying to like get more productive, figure out how to make my life work better for several months now. And I'm reading all these productivity books, and every single one of them is like, get up at 6 a.m. and have a glass of water and go to the gym and blah, blah, blah. And then structure your day and do this at this time, this at this time, this at this time. And I look at every single one of these people writing these books as a man who has no children who are at home anymore. It's like, I don't want to hear it. Give me the productivity book for the mom who is also running stores. Like, it's that's what they say about books, is that most people write them because that's the one they want to read, and it's not available. I think it's time for you. That's the next stage in Jenn, as she writes that productivity book. There's a real I know I really gendered it there really hard, but there is something, working mom guilt for any working moms who are like listening to this. It's like, it's really different. Being a working mom is really different. Me taking a business trip is totally different than when my dad took business trips when I was a kid. Yeah. My dad took business trips all the time. We didn't even know. He didn't even tell us he was leaving half the time. I am like made to feel like the worst person in the world for leaving my children. It's really tough. And then, yeah, it's a challenge. Being a working mom is a serious challenge, and it requires, you're taking care of so many people and things, and it requires being really careful to not stop taking care of oneself, to make sure I'm still taking care of me, and make sure I'm still doing something for me, which is part of the reason why I do the barbershop, because it's such a different headspace. There's nothing about work in there. There's nothing about kids in there. It's challenging, so it engages my brain, and I get to just engage a totally different skill set. I don't have to worry about this other stuff. Like, it just takes me to another spot. It allows me to shut off all of that stress and worry and taking care of people and just take care of me.
That's wonderful. That's actually, that does dovetail into my next question, because we're talking about two stores. You ran ComicsPRO, and it sounds like you're still running it behind the scenes, even though you won't say it.
I'm not. I am totally vice presidenting this time. It's all Joe. Parenting
to incredible kids, the competitive singing. You have this relationship I want to talk a little bit about in a minute, but run me through, what does a Jenn work day, what does a day look like for you? Not a work day. And by the way, have there been any of those books, as someone who is a fan of those books, has there been any of those books that have really you would recommend before we get into this question? Or are you just throwing them all out the window, like at the next time some man tells me how to
What I've done with them is kind of take inspiration from them. So okay. I've taken what they're saying as like a jumping off point for my own reflection on what to do. I will say the one that I'm currently reading, which I will try to find real quick here, he does talk about how he tried that like getting up really early thing, and then he was immediately like, no, my body doesn't do this. This is not for me. Like, my body operates at this time. So one of his things was, how do I find the time that I operate best at? It was called, where are you? Productivity Project by Chris Bailey.
Huh. Right.
I will say The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is fantastic.
It is.
Fantastic book. I would recommend that. Like, oh yeah. Like that. Yeah.
All right. Well, so take me through.
That gave me so much insight on myself, and probably actually also caused me to step down from the presidency of ComicsPRO.
I need to go back and read that. It's been a minute. It's been a while since I read that one.
Part of what he tries to really instill is this idea, like, if you don't love it, if you find yourself not loving it, you're not going to put the effort into it that you want to. And that was why I was kind of hitting a spot where I was finding like I wasn't able to apply as much energy to ComicsPRO as I was before, and I realized that if I kept on that track, I would just become not useful anymore as president. So
I find personally that like my energy level is the indicator, right?
Yeah.
The energy that I'm putting into this thing is the indicator that this is the thing I should be doing.
Yes.
If I'm finding reasons to take a break, or if I'm like completely keep procrastinating, like those are all indicators. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing with my time.
Yep. Right? Absolutely. Yeah.
No beating yourself up over that.
Yep.
All right. So you wake up whenever the fuck you want.
I have to get up and get kids to school.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Children, they need to go to school. So yeah, I get up and get kids to school. And I usually don't do anything other than get kids to school in the morning. I come back from that, and then I will like get a coffee. I'll get breakfast. I will usually do a little downtime that's either reading comics or doing a crossword, because I don't find that my brain, that I'm ready to work till about 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. I just don't. There's just nothing productive happens before 10 a.m. Just doesn't. And I feel out of sorts if I don't take a minute in the morning to just like center myself and just be with like by myself. So about 10 o'clock, I will check my emails. I'm currently working on like how I'm going to structure my days going forwards. It's really a case of I open my email and then I just like deal with whatever is on the list of emails, and then I also maybe go to an appointment or two, or to I just recently restarted doing ballet classes once a week, so I might go to my ballet class, or I might have a kid who needs to go to an appointment, or I might have a call from the school that I need to pick up a kid, or or the kid might be just home from school. I have to go to my Milton store to like check out things there, or maybe I got to go do a bank deposit. There's no structure, is what I'm trying to say. And at 3:00, I go pick kids up from school, and then on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, they have things after school that I have to take them to, and then we try to do a game night on Wednesday nights, and we try to have some routine in our lives to hang out together as a family. And it's between the hours of like 10 and 3, I try to get as much work done as I can, provided I don't have a child at home or a child to take somewhere or an appointment or some such. And then sometimes I work a little bit more after they get home from school, because I just need to get a little bit more work done. But I try to not work after they come home from school till they go to bed, and then I open my computer at 10 o'clock at night, and I usually work till midnight on paperwork, FOC, invoice generation, orders, payroll. Actually, I do that earlier in the day. But yeah, there's those sorts of tasks I do. And I'm really trying to stop that. I'd really like to not do that anymore. I'd like to get rid of that nighttime work time, because I don't think that's good for me, and I need to probably get more sleep. And yes.
Yeah, I get that.
All of those things.
Completely.
So, yeah.
All right, one last question.
It's kind of just a swirling vortex of what do I need to do next. That's what I'd call it.
That feels right. That feels very familiar, actually, come to think of it.
It's
What's on fire? Let's play What's on Fire. I've got a hose. Let's point it at something.
Yeah.
Yes.
While I was at ComicsPRO, I got a call from the government that they're auditing me for 20 and 21. That's next week.
Wonderful.
I'm getting audited next week. So yeah, that's my current fire that I have to try to put out quickly.
All right, I'm getting the can we make noise yet? So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we can be done. So I remember, because there's a group of us that do a lot of conventions together, right? And yes. I do remember the I don't know, I want to say 6 months, where every show that we normally would see you, and we would normally see Chip Mosier, because he's just started showing up again, because we didn't know what was happening in his life, but we knew something was coming, right? He and David were hanging out a lot. We're like,
yeah.
Something's going on here. There's a dynamic. Anyway, and somehow you two just kept showing up at the party at the same time. It was really weird. You and Chip Mosier of Distillery are, and formerly of Comixology, and formerly of Boom, and that dude's had quite the career. I know that you two are in a relationship now, and that's wonderful, because I'm fans of both of you, and it's just so nice when you see that. But can you talk? I mean, I don't want to get too into your personal life, but I do want to talk about the fact that you now have in your home a retailer who deals with a lot of other retailers, and a publisher who his job it is to sell to retailers, and and he's made a career of that. Talk about how that has changed your thinking, right? How is that? Has that, or has it not? Maybe you were just so well formed that you're like, whatever, Chip. I know what the real truth is. But has there been that change?
Well, I definitely have learned a lot. Like, I do get to see behind the curtain quite a bit, which is nice. And so I've learned a lot about that side of the operations, and I love that. Like, I love knowing how all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, me too.
At the murder board of comics.
That's right, the murder board.
We
talked about
the
that
other day.
I was talking about how I wanted to see the whole. When I started Prana, I wanted to be one of the few people who saw the whole board of comics publishing and retail and the whole thing. And I think I'm getting there. And you talked about it being more of a murder board, where we're just taking red string from picture to picture. Yeah.
So how it feels sometimes.
Truly.
So it's been really, really helpful to see the additional side of things, to understand more of the pieces, like more of how all the pieces fit together. I think that's been really cool. And it's been my privilege to be able to help inform a publisher on how to make good decisions when it comes to working with retailers. He hasn't totally 100% listened to me on all things, but that's okay. He listens to me most of the time.
I am shocked to hear that, knowing good old Chip. I am shocked to hear.
But yeah, no, I think it's the other thing that was the other thing was a concern to me, and I think like I don't think this is gonna resonate with some people and not with others, but like I've always been known as somebody who is very close with publishers and often distributors. Like I have friends in publishing and distribution. Like I hang out with them, and that was already like a little bit in question, I think, as president of ComicsPRO. Like how objective could I be? Was I just like defending my friends, or was I really on the side of retailers? And I assure you, like I was really on the side of retailers. Like believe me, I can still have a civil conversation with someone and be on the side of retailers. And I think that was also like that was my strength, is that I had the access to these people because I'd built relationships with them. So I could say, hey, let's get on the phone and deal with this, or just like text. I could text someone and be like, can you explain this to me? And they would tell me, because I built up this relationship of trust. But things became a little bit more of a gray area when, Chip and I started being in a relationship together, because then and then he started Distillery, and then you're like, well, now she's really on the other side, and can we really trust her motives? So I don't know how many people were really thinking this or saying this, but it certainly has been in the back of my mind. And I almost like, since Distillery started, was just like waiting for somebody to make it. But I never wanted that role, president of ComicsPRO, to be in suspicion of being ineffective, right? Like that role needs to be as effective as possible. And I don't want anyone to ever think it's not effective. So that was also a bit of a factor in me stepping down. So I didn't want there to be any like question marks.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good.
All right. I think we're getting close to the end here. Is there anything that we didn't cover? Anything that you would like to say to the literally dozens of people who are going to see this?
I don't know.
I mean, we dug pretty deep, I feel.
Yeah, I know we talked about a lot of stuff. Yeah, I would say like, I don't know. I think maybe the last thing I would say is like, I talked a bit about being a mom and, running stores and doing that. I've obviously been doing this for 25 years. Things have changed dramatically over time in terms of like the gender makeup of comics, which is great. And I've been asked so many times about like, what is it like being a woman in comics? It's challenging.
Yeah. There's a really great moment there's a video of a parade, I think. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there's this really great moment where this guy is like interviewing you, and he just cannot get over this. But okay, so you own the place, right? You don't just work here, right? Okay, so you own it, and you know that you're a girl, right? You get that.
There was one time this person came to sell me ad space in some far too expensive magazine that it was like a neighborhood magazine, and the ads were insane. I was like, this is nuts. And so they came in, and it was a woman too selling to me. She comes in, she talks to me, we discuss it, she goes over the whole pitch, and I was like, look, that's just really this is way out of my budget right now. And she said, is there someone else I can speak to that makes the decisions? Just like, get out. I could not believe it. It was crazy. So what I was going to say was, being a woman in comics is challenging. Being a woman in comics in a position of power is even more challenging. I would say that how I speak has to be very specific, and I have to watch the way I speak and what I say far more than if there was a man saying the same thing. And a whole bunch of people out there listening to this are gonna like, yes, that's absolutely true. And then the people who are the ones who take issue with how I speak are the ones who are saying that's nonsense. So you're saying that's nonsense right now. You're the problem.
I'm looking at you. Yeah, I got you.
But no, it's really true. And I took on the position knowing that was accurate, and knowing that I was going to have a fight on my hands. And knowing too that like leading up to taking over the position, I wasn't ready to speak in the way that I needed to. So I did spend my time in the vice presidency, like intending to move up into president, figuring out how to speak and how to phrase things in a way that would be the most, I don't know, the least ruffling of feathers. Just the way that would come across as not being bitchy, which is how women are often come across when they are in power and they say something that is assertive, which is really frustrating because I'm a very assertive person.
I can only imagine. Yes.
It's a lot of self-management. So, yeah, that's all. I don't know what that has to do with anything,
right.
but I just wanted to share that perspective because I think it is a perspective that's valuable, and I think some people like probably do wonder like what it was like, leading in a very male-dominated industry. Happy to take a break and not be the focal point of people's frustrations for a little while. That's for sure. Looking forward to that. Congratulations. And working instead on like managing my whirling vortex of stuff to do.
Well, I can't wait to see what happens now that you can focus on that whirling vortex and not on solving all of the problems. But
yes. Solve
can
some
you tell
problems.
us? Yeah, what's that?
I'll solve some problems on the side.
Oh yeah, exactly, but only quietly, and you'll never know it was me.
Yes.
So, where can again my audience of dozens of people? Where can they find you? And where can they tell me about where they can find the dragon, where they can hear from you, social media, all that?
Okay, so I have 2 stores in Guelph and Milton, Ontario. You can find us at dragonguelph.com, or actually we'll do thedragonweb.com because that's easier for anyone to type because who can possibly write Guelph?
It's not even a real word. I'm not convinced it's actually on a map somewhere. I think you made it up.
Thedragonweb.com was my original website. I couldn't get the dragon when I opened, so I came up with this ingenious plan to call my website The Dragon Web because it was on the web. It was 1998. That is my defense, okay? And I regret it. Some people still think that's my company name. It's not. So anyways, at some point I picked up Dragon Guelph and Dragon Milton, but the Dragon Web still exists and points to Dragon Guelph, as does Dragon Milton. Both those websites will redirect to Dragon Guelph. It all funnels into one. It's just like lots of different ways to get to the same spot.
Gotcha.
I am online on like Facebook and Instagram, but both of those are private accounts. And I just FYI, if you friend me on Facebook and I've never met you, I'm not accepting that friend request. So there's lots and lots of people who try to friend me, and I'm like, I don't know you. I'm sorry, it's not happening.
We're not actually friends.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, I also, if you just Google me, there's lots of me on the internet, lots of interviews and videos, and yes, there are Magic the Gathering videos where I scream very loudly, I believe, in one of them. If you watch
with the werewolf guy.
The werewolf 5-parter?
Yes. Yes, I did.
So much
I spent
fun to do.
a big chunk of my day watching Jenn Haines online. It was a day.
Yeah, my Eisner video is online. My winning Eisner video is online as well. And I think we did a video advertising like gift cards a few years ago. I don't know. There's stuff. And then if you want to go over to the store's Facebook pages, though, you can find me doing lots and lots of live shows during the pandemic. Those are maybe interesting to watch. We're on The Dragon is on Facebook and Instagram as well. So yeah, you can get to that from the website. So
thank you, Jenn. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. It's been great.
I was hoping to get the exit interview of my dreams, and I think we got there. I think we covered it all.
I hope so.
Awesome. All right. So once again, my name is Adam Freeman. This has been Comics Industry Insiders, and there's no more insider than Jenn Haines. Follow us on all the socials that are all in our show notes down below, along with a lot of the stuff that Jenn and I talked about. And make sure you like and subscribe, because I'm on YouTube also, as well as the podcast, so I'm supposed to say that every single time. Like and subscribe. It's just a single word now. Like and subscribe.
Totally is.
Thank you, Jenn. This has been so good. Bye.
It's been great.
Hey, it's me again. I do hope your notebook is as full as mine after listening to Jenn. Before you leave, check out the show notes. We put in links to all the comics she mentioned at the Dragon site to order. As always, special thanks to Steph Girk, who produced this episode and makes me look better than I do, and research demon Anthony Militano, who makes me look smarter than I am. And of course, thanks again to Jenn. I do hope you get some rest. Namaste, y'all.
it's hard to be humble when you're this small.